And we've gone double Dutch in 2022. Max Verstappen is the Formula One world champion. And those are the kind of words we were really hoping to hear Crofty belt out once we knew that Verstappen was going to cross the line and become world champion. But that never even had the opportunity to happen because the FIA just did not communicate what was going on in the race today at Suzuka. Obviously, even if they had known, we might not have seen that kind of finish with Max Verstappen being a clear winner. But no one seemed to know that Max even had the chance of winning the championship after it was decided that the race was going for less than half distance, and the points would be only given half the points that we were expecting to give for a full race. That's what the storyline was. There were going to be half points awarded at Suzuka because a lot of it was rained off and due to the red flag incident with Sainz earlier on. We'll get back to that in a minute. And everyone assumed it would be half points and that the championship could not be won at Suzuka any longer. But we got to the final lap of the race. Verstappen has already crossed the line. And then you've got Leclerc and Perez battling out. And Leclerc screws up. Goes straight on at the last chicane. The FIA obviously decided a short time later that he gained an advantage in doing so and got a 5-second time penalty, putting Perez in P2 instead of P3, which he ended up, which where he actually finished the race in. And then obviously they decided that the full points would be awarded for the race. So whatever position you started in over the first 10 positions, you would be awarded the full amount of points. And this was not communicated from the FIA to the teams, to the media. Everyone was out the loop. And with that last corner incident, of course, the commentary, the media would have made a much bigger deal out of it and would have said, well, if this is going to change the outcome of the race with Perez going in second, that would make Max Verstappen the champion. There would have been some jeopardy to it. It would have been built up a little bit. Would have been entertaining. But instead what we got is Max Verstappen being interviewed, finishing his interview there, and just starts to walk away. Johnny Herbert's conducting it there in front of the crowd, and then suddenly Johnny Herbert gets in his ear, oh no, actually Max Verstappen is actually the champion. Calls him back 2 seconds later and they said, oh, by the way, Max, you're the world champion. Oh, am I? It was utter shambles, and I can't really blame the media. Watching it, I was thinking, why are they not building this up more? I'm thinking in my head, isn't that what's going to happen? But obviously the FIA hadn't communicated this to anyone. So really, really disappointing end to the championship. Obviously, we still had that little bit of excitement of everything coming to a head. But it could have been built up so much more, and with that little bit of jeopardy at the end, that could have been made into a really good storyline. I'm sure Netflix will filter stuff together and mix stuff around and make it sound more exciting when you watch Drive to Survive next year. But living in that moment, it was a little bit of a letdown, particularly for all the people in this kind of area in the UK and Europe who were getting up early. And we're not used to getting up early for Grand Prix. We're used to having it at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Sunday, and people got up early, and with the rain delay already and only getting basically a sprint race, I think people were looking for a little bit more for a finale to the end of essentially of the Drivers' Championship. So a real shame. I felt quite bad for Johnny Herbert having to try and announce that when he had no real idea why. I don't think he even understood why. But obviously we do have a new champion in Max Verstappen. So congrats to Max. But obviously we've still got the Constructors' Championship to be won. Obviously it's still looking like Red Bull is clearly going to be winning that, but we've got to hold out a little bit longer and see what happens. Maybe we'll see that happen in the USA in the next race. Going back to the point I made earlier, though, about Sainz going off, aquaplaning, essentially spinning out into the barrier. It was then the race was then being red flagged. They had a safety car come out, and all the cars would be coming back around, and then eventually going to be going back to the stationary position in the pit lane. What happened though is during that time, they had let a tractor come out onto the side of the track, not even properly into the gravel. He was slightly onto the track, coming to collect the Ferrari while the cars were still going past. Most of the cars were going at a slower pace behind the safety car. However, you had Pierre Gasly, who was that bit further back because he had to pit coming with a little crash that he had a little bit earlier. Luckily, he was able to pit and get back out again. But going into the pit lane, he lost, probably a good minute behind the rest of the pack. So he had to catch up. He was catching up, and then he comes around a corner at full speed, and then you have a tractor there on the side of the track. And for people who don't know what happened here in 2014 with Jules Bianchi, Jules Bianchi was a Formula One driver who lost his life in a similar situation, essentially where his car went off within a crash. It went underneath the tractor and basically took such a terrible impact to the head that it killed him. Didn't die instantly, but died very soon after, I believe, in hospital to severe head injuries from literally flying in a Formula One car straight under a tractor. And then you have the exact same thing happening here, where you just seen an incident where Carlos Sainz has gone off, aquaplaned. He was going pretty much in a straight line, and still had such a quite a bad crash into the barriers. And Gasly could have easily had the same thing and died on the spot. So anyone who saw the kind of post-race interviews would have heard Pierre Gasly talking about that, talking quite passionately, really annoyed. The other drivers, especially people like Lando Norris, have come out on Twitter and so on, making their voices heard on it as well, because obviously no one wants to see a repeat of that. Obviously Formula One is dangerous enough. And then you get in this type of incident. So the FIA have been all over the show this weekend. You've had the incident with obviously the championship deciding points that they didn't seem to communicate to anyone and just read through the rule book. It doesn't matter if they were right or wrong about it. It does seem like that they were right based on the rules. But these rules are things that had changed quite recently, and they hadn't kind of pointed that out, which they could have easily done to the media and to the teams, so that everyone was kind of aware of what was going on. Because this is a sport where it's not just a single referee who's deciding it, or even some VAR person in the back. Like in football, it's a really complicated sport with complicated machines, with thousands of people all working towards that in that one sporting event, all in a short space, all in a small space. So the communication is really key, and the FIA really fell down on that. And obviously letting out then a tractor out onto the track while the cars are still going past. Doesn't matter if they're doing a slow speed or a fast speed, because to be honest, if you go off there and you clip the side of the tractor, that's it for you. So there's really no excuse for it happening. Okay, so I've obviously dissed the FIA, which is mostly what I'm doing here with the WTF FIA words at the top of the screen here. But obviously the actual race itself was still pretty entertaining. It was pretty much a sprint race. Obviously Max got ahead from the start, taking Leclerc on the outside. A really kind of masterful turn. I would say that in the past I've not really been a massive Max Verstappen fan, but this season he's really matured a lot. You're seeing more mature drives from a more confident driver, and he's now that little bit older, and he's starting to act a little bit more mature generally. As you might have seen the press conference before Suzuka, there's some immaturity still there, but mature drive with it. We saw a few really cool overtakes as well. I mentioned in my last video about Sebastian Vettel being his favourite race. You saw a few good overtakes from him as well, and even George Russell was doing some amazing stuff. I believe it was turn 6. He was going around the outside, around the corner where no one else was taking that line, and he overtook 2 or 3 cars in the same way in the same corner. So really good job from him. But obviously, as I said, we're on to America next. We've still got the Constructors' Championship here to go. It's been still an exciting kind of finish to the season. The packs are still quite close up, and there's all to play for second, third, fourth place. And obviously, things are still still being pretty exciting for that. So it's not all over yet. We've still got that little bit of time left. I believe there's another 4 or 5 races left. So plenty more to watch there. But again, just want to say congratulations to Max Verstappen and Red Bull. The celebrations looked great. I've got myself a Red Bull just here. So thanks, guys, and for the entertainment race, and cheers.